Hey everyone, it's Lindsey Baker with the Action Hour. I'm here today with Jack Gescheit of the Tree Spirit Project. Jack is here today because he wants to tell you about an event that will be coming up this Saturday, August 31st. So go ahead, Jack, fill him in.
Hi, and thanks, Lindsey, for having me on and covering this topic again. So it's this coming Saturday, August 28th, for those people in the Bay Area. It's a chance to have, do two things at once. Spend a beautiful day in a national park that's free to the public, Point Reyes National Seashore, and also help the Tule Elk there, who are literally dying of thirst and starvation, thanks to brutal Park Service policies. Bring them some water. We're going to have a whole bunch of people gather and literally haul out water, carry out water in your hands or in a backpack 3 miles out. So it is definitely for the fit, for the able-bodied, but it'll be a community gathering. And that's one of the beautiful elk out there in the northern herd. It's a complicated story. We'll get into it. But basically, that is the very last pond in the reserve that has water in it, and it's quickly drying out because of the ongoing drought in California. And that guy needs our help, along with scores of other mature and young, beautiful Tule elk in Point Reyes Seashore that are dying of thirst now. The name of one of the videos I think you're going to show, Lindsey.
Yes, I'm actually going to be showing. I want to give people a little bit of a background on what's going on, and I like this clip, so let's show.
My father was at the signing of the legislation. He was there in the Oval Office with President Kennedy as he signed, and it says that historical, cultural virtues of this national seashore shall be maintained to the extent that they are consistent with maximum preservation of the natural environment. You cannot have maximum preservation of the natural environment with commercial cattle there. This perpetuates a forced marriage of two completely different ideals of land stewardship. It's preservation versus production.
The question is, the House has suspended the rules and passed the bill H.R. 6687 as amended. The opinion of the chair, 2/3 being in the affirmative, the rules are suspended, the bill is passed, and without objection, the motion to reconsider is laid on the table. Without objection, the title is amended.
H.R. 6687 essentially laid out a couple different things. It acknowledged continuation of ranches out at Point Reyes National Seashore. It also would have put into place the killing of the free-ranging Tule elk herd at Drake's Beach.
Now in Point Reyes, which is theoretically some of the most protected lands in the world, and it has a species that was brought back from extinction, and now you have the national park planning to kill the elk in order to protect the cattle industry.
This is an animal that's already outnumbered 10-to-1 by cows, which is contrary to all good park principles and law. There was a specific mandate for Point Reyes that this park would be used as a place to restore Tule elk. And that is now being ignored by the Park Service because of pressure from the ranching community.
Wow, so that pretty much lays it out, folks. The ranchers came on the land, I think because they said historically, they said that they needed to make some revenue, so they allowed the ranchers on way back when, and then slowly but surely they took over. They actually started taking more and more of the land, and now they've got what is the percentage that the cattle ranchers of the land do they occupy?
About a third of the park, but I would say is they were there. It's an interesting argument, who was there and who lays claim to the land. The point is the ranchers have been there, European settlers, my lineage, right, in America, been there on that land about 150 years, but they were paid millions of dollars when the park was formed in 1962, and the agreement that they would leave over, it was called a life lease. So for many of the ranchers, when they died or when their spouses died, 20 to 25 years, and then they would be transitioned off. Well, that expired decades ago. In the meantime, though, they lobbied like crazy because they had a nice deal on that land, cheaper by far, about half, compared to land outside other parts of Marin County and nearby Sonoma County, where there are thousands and thousands of cows. So they were paid and then they lobbied politically to stay, which, that's what businesses do. But this is a destructive business, also a cruel business if you know anything about dairying or ranching. So they have no place inside a national seashore. That was never the founding legislation, which that elderly gentleman, meaning about 10 years older than me, Ken Brower, the son of David Brower, which might be familiar to environmentalists. He was the first executive director, the father, David Brower, first executive director of the Sierra Club. His son, Kenneth, is now a very wonderful spokesman for the park, along with Yvonne Chenard and other environmentalists who learn about this issue and see, as Ken says very well, it's the two issues diametrically opposed. You either have domesticated cattle destroying the land, or you have wild animals in smaller numbers restoring the land. And you can't do both. And the argument now from the ranchers is, we have, regenerative ranching, which is just complete nonsense, like clean coal. Can't be done, certainly not in a national park.
Let's watch the second and last part of the clip of him talking.
Bible on how to manage parks is it's called Management Policies, and it specifies that parks are supposed to get rid of, phase out commercial ranching wherever is possible. That's the rule. It's not just policy, but it's also law. It's in the law of the establishing regulation that my dad was there and watched being signed in the Oval Office, and it requires that the natural world, the natural environment, be the priority in Point Reyes National Seashore. Let me find the language. It's because I can't remember it exactly, but it's the property acquired for the park by the Secretary of the Interior shall be administered by the Secretary, and these are quotes, without impairment of its natural values, in a manner which provides for such recreational, educational, historic, preservation, interpretation, and scientific research opportunities as are consistent with and based upon and supportive of the maximum protection, restoration, and preservation of the natural environment within the area. That's impossible with commercial ranching. There's no way that the best ranching practices in the world can be consistent with maximum protection of the environment. And that's not just for this park, for the National Seashore. It echoes the language of the Organic Act that establishes the Park Service. This applies to all parks except historic parks. The parks that are designated historic parks or historic sites, like Harper's Ferry or Harriet Tubman or Chaco Canyon Culture Center, or Rosie the Riveter over in Richmond. You can't prioritize the national environment.
Good points. So let's bring people a little bit more up to date. At what point did you get involved, and did activists start to take, action? They started to see what was going on. Can you just kind of bring people up to date on that, and how long this has been going on that you guys have been trying to, make them take some action to help the elk? Yeah.
Well, I've been involved. It's funny. I've been saying I'm new to this, but I've been new to this now for over 2 years, which is hard to believe. My, how time flies during a global pandemic, right?
Yeah.
But I saw, for me, it was seeing a 90-minute documentary, which, these days for people who are fast-paced is a lot of time, but it's an engaging documentary called The Shame of Point Reyes by an independent filmmaker named Skylar Thomas. And I credit him with just showing me 90 minutes. I was at a vegan meetup group, watched this documentary in San Francisco, and I was just shattered. It just covers everything. One of the characters in that film is Diana Oppenheim of Tule Elk, and you just showed a clip of her speaking as well, a fiery young woman activist, also a yoga teacher, who's been at this for a few more years than me, as has Skylar, spending both of them lots and lots of hours in the park. In fact, Diana was a volunteer for the Park Service and was a volunteer of the year, in fact, until she learned about the elk and their plight and they're being pushed aside and killed by brutal policies, and spoke up about it and was silenced. And that's one of the beautiful bull Tule Elks. I took that photograph just last week, in fact, as I've been going out there more and more recently. And I mean, you can just feel that guy, you know, the intelligence, and
They're so beautiful.
yeah, they're beautiful animals. The more you spend time with them, as the other two people have, and has Ken and all the other people, the more you begin to feel, you know, these are magnificent animals. There are only 6,000 in the entire world. Or as we like to say on this issue, there are about as many cows just in Point Reyes Seashore, for-profit, private profit cows, as there are Tule elk in the world. So please, cows out of the seashore. It shouldn't be for-profit businesses that destroy and denude the land and pollute the water and pollute the air at the expense of this. They're not federally listed as endangered. That's a political issue, and we can talk about that. But they are a rare species, to be sure. And
Well,
even if
they're
they
part
weren't,
of an ecosystem that without them, it's being broken down, and it's happening with all different wild animals in the same cause, cattle ranching. Let's watch another clip here, Betrayal of Point Reyes.
It's completely outrageous that a national park would choose to kill Tule elk when their whole species is at such risk.
So I think it's time to let the elk do their work and restore this to what the mission of a national park should truly be. This is an embarrassment for the national park system.
Under federal law, when you have a federal park, it's required that there be an environmental impact report. In the existence of this park, we have never had one. It's in violation of federal law.
If the cattle ranchers would transition themselves away, they get to be heroes.
I fell in love with Point Reyes National Seashore. It was the first place I ever backpacked. It was the first place I ever camped. And I really just knew instantly that this was a special part of the world. This is actually the largest piece of protected coastline in the United States, south of Alaska. It's home to 15% of all California biodiversity. It's really sort of an exceptional place for wildlife. 30% of the land here in our national seashore is leased to private dairy and cattle operations. 30% is a large number for a national park which is supposed to protect wildlife and biodiversity.
The landscape is in terrible condition where the cattle are. It's some of the most degraded habitat that I've seen in my 30-some years of tracking elk throughout their native range of California, so it's pretty bad. The cattle are running the show. Cattle just eat everything. They eat everything down to the ground. So the elk are discriminate feeders. They'll feed a little bit and they shift. They're a grazer and a browser. And so they won't destroy the habitat. There's not enough of them to do that.
There are over 5,000 heads of cattle in Point Reyes National Seashore, and there are only about 500 elk total in the park. So
There you go. Just what you were saying before.
I just want to shout out that's a different film.
Wait 1 second. How long will it take if they were to end the cattle ranching there? How long do you think it would take to restore the land back to what it should be?
I have no idea.
Would it be like years? Would it be one year?
Define restore, you know, to what extent? But getting the cattle out, you would end the just massive degradation. It's just way too many animals. It pulverized the soil, coat it with like 10 million gallons of feces and urine out of a cow, you know, every year. I mean, it's just a massive abuse of the land. And the challenge with the issue is the cattle industry is very powerful and they have their public relations machine in place trying to convince people. The average person is convinced, in fact. That's the trouble. We're undoing their damage, which is ongoing, which is, oh, these are small family farms and hardworking little families that have been there and they're being pushed out by this movement of these activists. And that's just a completely false narrative. They were paid They got a sweetheart deal. They don't want to leave, and they're really massively degrading the land. It just keeps saying those same things. And I just want to give a shout out to that film. Is not The Shame of Point Reyes by Skylar Thomas, worth seeing, 90-minute documentary. That is a film called The Betrayal of Point Reyes by another filmmaker, Silver Reaction Media, Tony Sagal, and he's an amazing guy. That's a 13-minute film with more of those talking heads giving a nice calm perspective and an overview of, in just 13 short minutes, everything that's going on out there that is just horrific.
Yeah,
I recommend both.
And what we'll do is put links to both of those films in the comments.
Yeah, there are hundreds of us now involved in this, and all working together to inform the public, and eventually the public then push on the politicians. And as the Berkeley bumper sticker says, when the people lead, our leaders will follow. That's what's kind of one of the things that has to happen. And of course, then lawsuits, the other magic bullet here we'll get to.
We'll get to that in a minute.
Yeah.
I do want to mention that we invite the cattle ranching industry, the cattle ranchers on, any of them, all of them on at any time to dialogue. We invite them on to Jane Unchained at any time, as well as Park Services is invited on to Jane Unchained anytime to give their side of the story and their viewpoints.
Absolutely. And the other irony is that, you know, those industries are really hurting. The markets are shrinking. And then especially here, there's California drought, which is really hurting their industry as well as even the wine industry. And, you know, there are those among us like Miyoko Shinner, who's an activist involved in this, of Miyoko's Creamery, who reach out and say, look, guys, we'll help you make a more viable business, not in this industry anymore, which is dying. It's being propped up with federal subsidies like the Sweetheart Land deal they have. So they could actually do better economically by transitioning out. And if they were open to it, there are resources available. We would help them. We're not demonizing them. It's just out of the park, guys. And the drought may kill them anyway. One of the dairies, the big ones there, iRanch, recently downsized because they drained the aquifer. They use, here's another figure. Guess how much water, Lindsay, 5,600 dairy and beef cows in all of Point Reyes use per day.
How much?
200,000 gallons.
200,000 gallons.
For 5,600 cows. It's, I think, for 45, 35 to 40 gallons per cow per day. And that's not even washing.
Reyes elk enough water to survive. They can't spare enough water to survive.
There's only 600 elk. They weigh about a third as much. And they're being pent. Half of the herd, half of the 600 elk are being locked into a piece of land that's drought stricken, fenced in only to protect the cattle industry, which is dying anyway. It's just absurd. The more you learn, the more crazy it is.
Okay, so let's move forward a little bit and tell people a little bit about what the first action you took was. So initially, you obviously contacted Park Services several times with no avail. And then what was the next step that you took for people that aren't filled in yet?
Well, we've taken a lot of action, but I think you're alluding to the first time we decided to bring water in ourselves to the elk. And that did work, which is to say we did that actually a total of 4 times, 4 different times. Each time the Park Service undid the hundreds of gallons we brought in, took out the troughs we brought in. And then finally, because they were getting such bad public relations on that, they actually did bring in some water troughs, which is great, to some part of the reserve, which is great, but it's still inadequate. And ultimately, we want them to bring in more water right away, immediately, and then solve the problem by taking down the fences so the elk can range and go where wild animals in a national park should go, which is to go find food and water. They're prevented from doing that, or the majority of the animals now in the largest herd, in the so-called, ironically named, Tule Elk Reserve, where 152 elk died just last year, which is a third of the herd died just last year under the Park Service's management.
Right. And so you brought in water. In fact, I think I have a clip of that. Let's go ahead and show that, bringing in water. It's like everything's working.
They will, but we had to try something. This needs to be done by the Park Service. This is their supposed contingency plan that's vaporware that they claim they would do, but they never do. So to hell with it, we're going to do it. So, you know, if bringing in water to elk is wrong, I don't want to be right.
So when we go look out there, what are we going to see the water in? What is it? Is it in plastic, or what is it? What did you pour water into tonight?
I think it would help us to know, because clearly we have to come out here tomorrow anyway to take it all out.
Fencing, the cows are a million pounds more unnatural and unhealthy at killing the elk, literally killing
I'm
the
not
elk.
going to engage in a debate on all the things that are going on greater in the.
Well, I'm not doing anything to harm the elk in any way. That's my point. And I know that's not, you know, you've got to enforce the rules. I totally get it. I have respect for what you do. I'm just trying to help the elk and then go home.
Tonight, the Tule Elk have water. Very brave activists went and successfully managed to drop some water into Point Reyes National Seashore in the Elk Preserve, where elk are currently trapped without water for the last 4 months. Many of them have been dying. Unfortunately, the park rangers and the sheriff, at the behest of the dairy industry, came, and we expect that they will be actively removing the life-giving water from the native wild animals, the Tule elk who live there.
Wow, so that was way back when. And there was that picture you wanted to show, Jack. I told you it was in there, the skeleton of the elk. Why don't you tell people a little bit of how, you know, how they die, you know, and how they get to look like that, what we saw there.
That photograph was by, I believe, Matthew Polverosa Klein, who's a National Geographic photographer, a professional. And he spent a lot of time in there wandering and coming, heartbreakingly upon all these elk corpses. They do decay very quickly, so he had to come upon them within a day or two of their death. And this is again from lack of water and lack of adequate forage in a drought-stricken area. And the Park Service said everything's fine. There's a contingency plan. I keep using air quotes on all these phrases that they use. Contingency plan in place, and we will bring water if needed. Blah, 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 and, you know, take them at their word. But then they did a count this year, and when we were pressing on them to bring in water and brought in water, and they cited me for disorderly conduct and this other nonsense, then they do a count, which they do every year, and said, oh, by the way, 152 animals fewer, 152 fewer elk are in the reserve. As activists, we say, well, you killed them, guys, because we told you it was happening. You ignored us, denied it, and this is what happens. And then Matthew was taking, I think he's got like 18 different bodies of dead elk, and it's just horrific. And then the coyotes tear them up, and the vultures get them, and they go away pretty quickly down to the skeletons. But it's happening again right now, and that's why, you know, we're doing an action again this Saturday. A lot of people are going to show up. We hope 75 or 100. And this time, instead of putting it in a nearby pond, we're going to walk it 3 miles out to show the lengths to which the Park Service should be going to put additional water in different areas of the reserve, so all the elk have water. It would take them a day to do it. We're working for weeks, you know, under the radar and doing these things as activist actions. They're not technically illegal. There's no regulation that says you can't walk in with a gallon of water and pour it into the last little pond of water that's left. You'll show a picture to. So it's safe, it's legal, it's participatory. You get exercise. You know, I'm trying to entice people to come out and join a community of fellow park lovers and elk supporters this coming Saturday.
If you can come out, if you can go there, by all means go. But if you can't, you can still share out this video. And are you going to be posting videos that day? Are you going to be doing like some video shooting where people can watch, maybe live, and, you know?
The connection out there isn't strong enough to do live streams, but again, Silver Reaction Media, who just did that, the video of that crazy masked man saying if help bringing water to elk is wrong, I don't want to be right. Whoever that guy was filmed by Tony of Silver Reaction Media. He's going to be out there again, and 2 other filmmakers, I think, as well are coming. So we'll get footage, and we'll get footage out of what we're doing, which should be pretty amazing, actually, which is to say, instead of just walking in a quarter mile like we did 4 times we've done this, this is going to be the 5th time, and we're going to go 3 miles out to put water, not even in a trough, so they can't go at us, the Park Service, for putting, you know, metal objects or foreign objects in the park or whatever nonsense they want to throw at us, but just actually into an existing drying up pond. It's about down to 8 or 9% of its capacity.
How can they empty that unless they suction it out? Then that'd really be bizarre.
Yeah, that would be really bizarre. But the fact that they're prioritizing cattle over wildlife in a park is already pretty bizarre.
Yeah, that is the whole thing. That they're saying the elk are a problem. We just covered a story on the wild horses. For weeks we've been covering the roundups of the wild horses in Nevada and Utah. And what they're saying is that the horses are a nuisance. The cattle ranchers are coming out and saying, and shooting them. And so there's the same thing. It's the same story, different wild animal.
Wolves in Idaho. And then if your viewers, I assume many of them are animal folks, so they know about a wonderful Orwellian named agency called Wildlife Services. What is the service that the USDA agency called Wildlife Services provides? Killing wildlife by literally the millions every year. Why? For the cattle industry. The cattle industry, on the scale it is, for the number of Americans that eat meat and not having any idea what goes on to produce that product, it's just a scourge on the earth. I mean, see the movie Cowspiracy, and that in 90 minutes gives you the whole picture.
Yeah.
And this is what's happening at Point Reyes is in microcosm what goes on in that film and why they're killing wild horses and rounding them up and shooting wolves and coyotes and mountain lions and raccoons.
If somebody wants to do some research on the organization that you just spoke of, where would they go to do their own personal
I put up a webpage on my treespiritproject.com website,
okay,
treespiritproject.com / wildlife services.
Okay,
You
we
can
have treespirit.com / elk, but you could go to Wildlife Services.
Yeah, it's a drop-down menu. You can Google just Tree Spirit Project, and then you can probably, as a phrase, I'm guessing it'll work, Tree Spirit Project, and then Wildlife Services, and my website comes up pretty quickly there. The other one I want to shout out to is In Defense of Animals. They have been involved in this. They funded every one of those water drops. They're involved and supportive of all this. So they've been really great. I mean, obviously, they're a great organization. And even now, PETA has gotten involved, and they're going to be in, exactly. I mean, yeah, they got educated and got involved, of course, as they would once they're educated, and they're going to be helping with this next action this coming Saturday. So it's just the more people know, the more people jump on board, and this is how you build a movement, build community, and right these wrongs.
Let's just put up the goals of this whole event you're doing now. I've got a copy of it. It says goal number 1, bring elk immediate water relief so more elk might survive a week or two of California ongoing drought. So you're hoping the drought ends in a couple of weeks? Or
well, we're hoping that these kind of actions provoke the Park Service into doing what they should be doing, which is they've already brought, it's crazy. They brought in water, but they didn't bring it into all parts of the reserve. So some elk get water, which we're grateful for. But guys, if you're going to keep them fenced in, which we don't want them to do, take down the fence. In the meantime, if you're going to make a zoo out of this place, then you got to bring food and water to the zoo animals. It's like having a prison yard and saying, well, we fed some of the prisoners. Well, great. You got to bring food and water to all the prisoners. And of course, a national park is not supposed to be a prison. Take down the fences, guys. It's a 3-mile fence that creates the Tule Elk Reserve. And on top of that, there's another 300 miles of various kinds of barbed wire fences that chop up the third of the park, 28,000 acres, into these ranches and dairies, which, again, to repeat ad nauseum, because it needs to be repeated ad nauseum, have no place inside a national park unit, Point Reyes National Seashore. And the irony is this is in West Marin County, where people are educated and care about the environment. And this nonsense is perpetuated because people don't know the truth about dairying and ranching.
Yes. And what I want to show right now, because I'm going to show right now the lawsuit, right? So an animal rights group, that would be you and others, are suing. Is it up there? Yeah. Are you suing? So why don't you talk a little bit about the lawsuit, and then we'll move on to the other actions you guys are taking. We still have more to
I'm one of the 4 plaintiffs, 3 individuals, 1 organization. So myself, Skyward Thomas, of the filmmaker, we talked about the shame of Point Reyes. Another woman who created Watershed Alliance of Marin and was a 4-year Tule Elk docent and knows a lot about the elk and the absolutely abusive treatment of the animals by the National Park Service out of the DC policy, Washington DC policy, along with the Animal Legal Defense Fund, also in Marin, have brought suit by a group called the Harvard Animal Law and Policy Program. So that's this animal rights group. That's them, Harvard Animal Law and Policy Program, with us 4 plaintiffs suing them over the abusive treatment of the elk. I mean, they killed a third of the herd last year inside the reserve. So we're working on that angle as well. And it's challenging because it's an ongoing case, and you have to convince a judge that the Park Service professionals managing the elk are mistaken. And the existing statute is you have to prove, that they're wrong or they're lying, and it's a very difficult thing to prove. They say everything's fine. Everything's fine. There's drought, but this is they call it a natural population decline. 152 elk out of a herd of 454 die, and that's natural. Well, it's not natural if there's a fence preventing the animals from leaving that land, which is drought stricken, and going to where there's food and water. So, I mean, welcome to George Orwell's future, where up is down and peace is war is peace and ignorance is strength.
It would seem that the facts tell themselves. I mean, it speak for themselves. How can the judge not see the facts of 400 and something dying in the last 10 years? Within the last year, how many have died? And this continues to happen. And how can they not look at the facts of what's going on? It just
that's a great question, and me as a fellow layman go crazy with the court. But they, the way the courts work is statutes, and then you have to prove or disprove. And I'm not an expert about even how I'm framing this, but you have to use a piece of law. You can't go before a judge and say it's really terrible. I love the animals and you're killing them. He looks at you like you're a child. That's the the dispassion of the court, right?
Yeah.
And God knows, judges vary, and some are more compassionate or care more about animals than others, but they can easily just pull back and be intellectual. And this is, in my humble opinion, just my opinion alone, the problem with our entire culture, where it's disconnected from the heart and from wisdom. Because you can go on that land and in 5 minutes, you can look where on one side of this fence, there's a fence line where separating the cows from the elk reserve. And you look to the left over here where the cows are, and the land is decimated. As that Tule Elk biologist, Julie, was saying in that documentary clip. And on the right, you see this beautiful land, coastal prairie. Actually, great. Hold that picture. So I'm walking on the cow side, and look, there's no bushes. On the other side of that fence, inside the reserve where those activists are lined up, that's coyote brush. It's shoulder height and even taller. And there's miles of it, acres of it. And the fence line is a perfect example of what elk do on the other side of the fence, which is they're in harmony with the habitat. And where I'm standing, it's beaten down to dirt, and then some, what we would call weeds, grow up, and then they're beaten down again, and it's just destroyed land, and there's cow pies there. That's a perfect example, a dividing line between what elk do to the land and what too many cows do to the land.
Yeah. Let's see if we have one of the other pictures here. This is the article about the lawsuit, but you can see here the land is much more green and
coastal prairie. There's beautiful landscapes in there, and the catchword is biodiversity, which for me is kind of vague, but it means lots of different kinds of plants and animals. That's biodiversity, and there are examples of that, thank goodness, still at Point Reyes. And there's coastal prairie again. I don't even know all the plants in there, but a lot of coyote brush to be sure. You see on the left, bottom left, there's a bull elk, and that's all his ladies. That's all the female elk in his herd out there on the reserve. And many are healthy, but many, far too many, are not. And we're not seeing any calves, which is young elk this season. So I was walked out there with a former Tule Elk docent, Laura, who's in on the lawsuit with Harvard as well, with me, a co-plaintiff. And she is way more knowledgeable than I am. It just keeps educating me like, there are no babies. There's no baby elk out here. That's a bull elk who's walking up and down the fence line during the rut, trying to get to females so that they can have more elk this year. And there are far too few. And the herd is being decimated in slow motion, and not even that slowly, right in front of our eyes. So come on out, folks. It's both heartbreaking and also inspiring to be among fellow activists on the land, actually doing something that matters, and also making a media event of it as well.
For those of you just tuning in, you're watching the Action Hour. I'm here with Jack Gashite from Tree Spirit Project, and we are talking about a very important action that's going to be taking place on August 31st at 11 o'clock Pacific time. Jack, where exactly are people meeting up for the event?
Point at inside the Tule Elk Reserve at the end of Pierce Point Road. It's Pierce Point Ranch, and there's a let's see. There's a Facebook event page for this, but it's probably easiest to get there from my website, treespiritproject.com/elk, and also In Defense of Animals,
Okay.
which is idausa.org/elk as well.
Great.
And there's, yeah, and people can just direct message me, and I'm happy to respond to them too if that's easier. Jack at treespiritproject.com is my personal email. Anybody who's interested, I'm happy to give you more information and directions and all the rest of it. Please.
Is this correct for IDA?
idausa.org. Thank you for putting that
okay.
up. But IDAUSA.
I'll fix it.
Yeah, thank
I'll
you.
go ahead, keep going. I'll fix it.
Yeah, so I like I say, I just a shout out to IDA. They've been really great on this effort ongoing and are very much involved with this coming Saturday. That's a donation link for what I do, working with them and for my own Tree Spirit Project organization. Yeah, I mean, it's just I'm one of many people working on this. I just I care so much about that land and this issue. And frankly, I mean, as much as I love the elk, if it was just about the elk, I would probably put my time and attention elsewhere. But this is also where it intersects with the destruction of the cattle industry and how that ties in with the climate crisis, which is in large part caused by the massive amount of cattle in America and the world, you know, which are, again, see the amount of the cowspiracy to see the massive destructive effect of the cattle industry.
Yes. And we're glad that people are putting the effort out there for the elk, because the elk are very important too.
Absolutely. Well, it's both here. It's both. It's the coincidence of working for wildlife and also working to educate people about the destructive force of the cattle industry, which is the bigger picture. This is a microcosm where we use a lot for what's happening at Point Reyes.
Yeah. We have another clip of another action you guys took. The prison
protest to protect the state's native Tule elk came to Point Reyes National Seashore this afternoon. Some elk watched as dozens of protesters made their way through the preserve. Tule elk are protected by federal law, but more than a third of the herd died in the past year from the lack of water and food. With another severe drought on the way, the protesters want the National Park Service to remove a fence that runs from Tamales Bay all the way to the ocean. The Park Service erected the fence decades ago to keep the elk away from nearby cattle ranches allowed to operate on federal land.
We're in another drought. More elk are going to die right now. Even in this beautiful foggy environment, there's not enough water and not enough food inside the elk prison. They call it a reserve, but it's killing the animals they're supposed to be protecting.
Now, in addition to their antlers and prison jumpsuits, the protesters switched out this sign to read Tule Elk Penitentiary. The federal lawsuit is underway to force the Park Service to take action. A park spokesperson told the I-Team's Dan Noyes today that they would have no comment because of the pending lawsuit.
What they say, but we do invite Park Services on at any time to dialogue.
Just if you bring them on, please have one of us there to counter their narrative, which is very calm and dispassionate and like, oh, there's adequate resources. We put in water, and should there be a need in the future, we have a contingency plan in place, blah, 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 blah. And it's just, I mean, that's what they've said. They said that twice before. So those crazy people, those activists there in those orange jumpsuits was to dramatize the fact that those elk are prisoners. They cannot get out and be wild animals in a national park. And 406, that's the number that was emblazoned on their uniforms. 406 elk, yeah, exactly, rest in peace, have died in the last decade under their management, which is ridiculous. And they also, the other, if I may say, the BS line from the National Park Service is there's a carrying capacity. There's a carrying capacity of about 300 animals on the land there, elk. And, well, that's a term that's used for a natural habitat, not basically a prison compound or a zoo compound. So they put a fence in and then call it, well, there's a carrying capacity of the land. It's like saying there's a carrying capacity of a zoo. It's like, well, it's not supposed to be a zoo, you clowns, stop it. But those are the kind of arguments they make, and it's maddening. So if you have them on, which would be great, have someone like me and 20 other activists or any one of us counter their narrative, which is just not true.
Okay, well, we want to just remind people again why we're here. We're about 3/4 of the way through the show, so you have some more time. I knew you'd have lots of time here, Jack. But anyway, what else do you want to share with them? What else do you want to? What can you say to make people take action?
Well, I'd say,
please do this for your own good.
Well, here's the deal. I mean, there's so much depressing news in the world today. Global pandemic, end times with climate crisis. You can actually take action here, and this is completely winnable. I'm 100% convinced, because it's a national park specifically. You can talk to anybody in that reserve and say, hey, do you know the Park Service is killing the elk? And now they're actually lobbying for another change in the rules, which would allow them to shoot some of the elk outside the reserve. There are also some so-called free-ranging herds, which are freer, but not completely free anyway, because they're still surrounded by ranches. And everyone's on our side for this. It's like, oh, that's terrible. Why would they do that? And then they ask the question, which leans into the whole issue of what the cattle ranchers do. This is winnable. So you can come out, get some fresh air, be free of COVID restrictions in compressed cities with condensed populations, and be among friends, see these magnificent animals up close, which is the amazing, unique feature, one of the unique features of Point Reyes Seashore, and carry a couple gallons of water in a backpack. They weigh 8 pounds apiece. Get a workout, visit the elk, and help them. And the more we do this, the more people that show up, the more the media is alerted to what happens here, thanks to the work of In Defense of Animals and my Tree Spirit Project and PETA and forelk.org, the more the public is educated, and then the politicians have to back up their stances of being pro-ranching, and this can be won. It's a great entry point to the larger issues at stake here, which, oh, by the way, are the climate crisis.
Yeah, if people speak up, and who can they, for those that cannot show up because they live far, far away, who can they contact? Who should, let's put a call to action up, and I'll just kind of write it out now, but we'll put it up in the comments, but who can they contact?
So on any of these organizations, there are lots of different organizations involved in this, and we all have our versions of who to contact and who to write. Some of the key players right now is the Secretary of the Interior, Deb Haaland, who we see as a potential ally, but she's the most American of all Secretaries of Interiors, being Native American, of any Secretary of the Interior in U.S. history. So we're optimistic if the people press on her, she'll listen. She'll at least care, even if she too, like any politician, has to play politics. The other one we're trying to get to shift on this is Representative Congressman Jared Huffman, who knows better. We know he knows better. He's a smart guy, used to be a lawyer for the National Resource Defense Council, NRDC, but he's firmly with the cattle ranchers, and we want to push him in the right direction here, which is do the right thing, Mr. Congressman Huffman, and get these cattle out of a park. They'll do fine elsewhere if you want to, help those constituents, which you need to do as well. So those two, and how to reach them, and their emails and phone numbers, which is great, are on my website, treespiritproject.com, idausa.org/elk, and forelk.org as well. All three of our web pages have links to make calls if you'd like to do that. It's all helpful. Letters to the editors, helpful. Lots of ways to be a keyboard activist, as well as this Saturday, August 28th opportunity out inside Point Reyes Seashore at 11 a.m. to be an actual hooves on the ground activist. See the elk, enjoy them, help the elk as well.
Yes, that's the message, folks. And share out this video, because that will get more people that don't know about it. Believe it or not, there are many, many people still unaware of what's going on in national reserves and national parks. And this is a problem, as you said, Jack, that doesn't only affect, it's a microcosm of a much larger problem going on all over the US and probably worldwide, of course, because people are consuming meat. And while they continue to do that until we get cell-based meat for them and other meat alternatives, which are luckily coming up quickly, that is probably going to help. But right now we have to take action here and help you guys out.
I listened to a wonderful podcast from Dr. Melanie Joy. Why do we wear cows, love dogs, wear cows and eat pigs, or the other way around, something like that. I'm sorry, but she's wonderful. She really, I'll paraphrase very briefly here. It's like educating people about meat and the effect of the cattle industry is like trying to educate a fish. And by the way, fish are, sentient, wonderful creatures. To tell a fish it's swimming in water. We're all raised in this unconscious belief system, which she labels carnism, that says eating meat is natural, normal, and necessary. And, yes, it's historic and we've needed to eat meat, but that time is long gone. Too many humans and too many resources to grow that as a food, not to mention, of course, horrific cruelty because of what we have to do to animals to feed this many millions of American mouths and billions of earthling mouths. Its time has come and gone.
How long have you been vegan?
Good question. So the reason I'm so compassionate to carnists, non-vegans, is I'm 61 years old, and for over 50 years, I ate meat and didn't know and didn't want to know.
Most of us did.
Right. So, I get it. And I have nothing but compassion because it's me for the majority of my life. I saw the movie Cowspiracy in 2014, I think it was. And then I couldn't run away from it anymore. And then, of course, at the time, my girlfriend was vegan for ethical reasons. I came in from the environmental wing of the movement, if you will. And then it's like, okay, I'm going to go this way. Now I can look toward the ethical argument and withstand the guilt and the shame and the brutality of the industry, which I didn't want to deal with, just out of mind. And there's all these defense mechanisms that we all have. And that's for me why I'm an advocate for being, supportive and patient. Dr. Will Tuttle helped me with that one, to be sort of Buddhist of all things, about how to help people to not do more violence and injury to themselves and to animals without doing violence to those people who are being violent, right?
Exactly.
It's very challenging because, my own judgment comes up and like, God damn it, can't you see? Like, didn't work for me. It's not going to work for them, Jack. Back off, chill out, and get wiser about how this issue is so systemic that people don't even know it's happening.
Yeah, it's just really insidious. It's tied into the drug, pharmaceutical companies and the meat industry. They're all tied together. But this big uproar is coming together from all different angles. And I think we've made so much progress in the last few years.
Well, that's the other positive thing, right? Veganism has gone from 1% to 3% or 4%. I mean, and vegetarianism and just people even understanding, I want to move toward eating more plants and less meat. That's fine by me. Vegan activists get into purity arguments and all that about what degree. I just say, just encourage people to move in that direction. It would help a lot.
Yeah. Start small steps. We're for small steps, and then big steps follow. And once you stop eating it, it's pretty disgusting, actually, in my opinion.
Yeah, well, you're like a lot of people. I wish I felt that way. I'll be honest and speak to the few meat eaters watching this and saying, I still love the smell. My mind compartmentalized, like, oh, that food smells good. And then I have to say, wait a second.
You know why?
Oh my God, that's a horrible food.
It's the spices, it's the herbs, because meat itself has no flavor. Think about it. If you were to just cook a piece of meat with nothing and eat it, it's pretty tasteless.
I don't agree. And I love you and love your show, and we're on the same side of this, but that's not my experience of meat. For 50 years, I ate it and yummy, but anyway, I'm incredibly healthy. I just went for a 5-mile run before the show, being a vegan for years now. So
how many years have you been vegan?
Since 2014, whenever that was, November, I think that film came out. I hosted a screening for Cowspiracy. And then it was a gradual for me. Some people just flip a switch. I was freaking out, like, I can't eat this. I can't eat this. I can't eat this. I'm like, oh my God, is this actually safe? So for me, it was maybe a 6-month transition into 2015. So 5 or 6 years now, for sure.
5 or 6, yeah. I've been vegan for 6 years, and I would never go back. It just, ugh.
Well, yeah, once you're there, then it's health, environment, and oh my God, ethics.
Mine was ethics first for me. It was ethics.
Yeah.
I really didn't know what was going on in the industry. I believe the humane meat and all those crazy things because you want to. And I wasn't eating it anyway. I was just eating chicken and fish, which is terrible, of course. But
right. So that's what I love about the point Reyes issue. I'm sorry.
No, go ahead. No, I'm just saying, it's terrible for the environment.
I mean, that's what I love as a vegan activist, an environmentalist, both of which hats I wear, as well as professional photographer and former copywriter. I go into Point Reyes Seashore, with my camera and take pictures of the elk or look at them and enjoy them and advocate for them. And then the average person walks by and says, oh, what are you doing? And we talk about elk. And I say, yeah, did you know the Park Service actually is killing these animals, which freaks everybody out. And then if you're kind of calm and gradual and listen to people, not just blather on like I'm doing at the moment, you're immediately talking about cattle. It has to go there because that's the big issue when you talk about pollution or methane or greenhouse gas or climate crisis. So Point Reyes is a wonderful place to do that because I much prefer, although I'm on your computer right now, the magic computer screen, I'm not a happy camper when I'm sitting in front of a screen. I go into the park beyond the range of cell phones and I'm on the land, calmer, slowed down, enjoying just the absolute exquisite beauty of these animals and the land there. And that's where my heart sings and I'm happier. And that's why I'm an advocate for all of that nature stuff.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah, and it's getting destroyed. So if we don't speak up, it's it's going to be too late very soon. So hopefully people will wake up. But right now they need to take the action of showing up at your event on August 31st. We're at the end of our time here. So if you want to wrap up with anything, we're just about out of time.
Yeah, for those people in the Bay Area, come on out or watch this whole show now because we've said this a few times, but come on out Saturday, August 28th, 11 o'clock, Pierce Point Ranch at the end of Pierce Point Road, Point Reyes National Seashore, Marin County, the only free giant Bay Area national seashore. And yeah, you can support these efforts with the organizations involved here, my Tree Spirit Project, indefenseofanimals.org/elk and forelk.org. Those are the three I'm most closely working with. And Pete is involved now as well. So wherever you feel called, your dollars help. Your writing and joining these organizations and supporting them. And of course, anything else you want to do. And come on out there and we'll talk more and have a wonderful outdoor experience that helps.
What do you think is going to happen if they, I mean, obviously if this gets back to Park Services, are you afraid they might block the entrances or?
Well, I don't know if I'd use the word fear, but I'd say curious. And you know, I mean, the park rangers have been professional and the park rangers have been great. I don't have a beef with them. They're professional. We treat them with respect. They treat us with respect. It's not technically illegal. We're always peaceful, organized, safe, COVID safe. We're just walking some water in and pouring it into an almost dry pond to save some elk. I'm willing to, you know, fight some silly court battle over that one. It's just, yeah, I mean, this is the safest kind of activism you can do. It's not, you know, tearing down anything or storming into a store, all of which other forms of activism can be effective. But this is low key, and they've let us. Actually, the last time we brought water in, we did it in front of them, and the Park Service was there and just let us do our thing.
They let you do it last time, and they didn't take the water out?
Well, they waited, cleverly, they waited 5 days until we were no longer monitoring the water, and then they took it out.
Well, this time, they can't. It's not a tub, right?
Correct. There's no way to take it out. There's no way they take it out, and I don't think, gosh, I don't even they from the bureaucratic head of it in DC would be heartless enough to say drain that water out that they just put in. I mean, God, they couldn't be that stupid. Yeah.
And make sure they.
Yeah, but the thing is, we're setting an example. We can bring maybe a few hundred gallons in. The park needs to bring 1,000 gallons in, and they can do it with pickup trucks and get it done in a day. So we're trying to set an example and show them what they should be doing.
And
if only they would.
To persuade them to do that. I mean, the public can help that too. We hope you get on the news that day.
Absolutely. So anyone in the media or inform the media about coming out there, that really helps us too, to show more people. It's all about informing the public, and the media has a media. God bless the media. Yay, media. In the time of, in our current times, I'm a big fan of media and informing people what's going on in the world.
When they show up and tell the truth, yeah, which, you know, luckily that's happening a lot more.
Well, the ones we're dealing with have been pretty truthful. They made some of them, I think, need some education, but they haven't been dishonest. Yeah.
I remember one of the news stories I was reading when I was doing my research today, they were really saying that the Park Services had their opportunity to bring in the water. I mean, they were just laying it out very straightforward. Normally the media does not talk that way toward, you know, about governmental organizations or some of their sponsors, the cattle ranch, but they were really letting them.
ABC TV here, the local affiliate, has been really wonderful in presenting. They don't just say he said, she said. They do a little bit of investigative research. This one reporter, Dan Noyes, has been really truthful He hears what we say, here's what the Park Service says, then he offers his opinion as a discerning, intelligent journalist. And, you know, that is typically more aligned with, yeah, the elk are actually dying. That's the truth. These guys aren't making this stuff up. And take a look for yourself, folks. So yeah, God bless good reporters still. They're underpaid and overworked these days, and we need them desperately.
On that note, we're going to say goodbye, folks. Please, if you can, share out this video. Tell everybody about what's going on at Point Reyes Park, Saturday, August 31st, 11 o'clock. If you're in the area and can come along and help out bring water, I would love to. I wish I was there. I would love to join you. That seems like be a lot of fun. And they should dress warmly in layers, right? So that
yeah, it could be 75 and sunny, or the fog can roll in, which is, you know, as my brother taught me when I moved to San Francisco 25 years ago, bring a t-shirt and a down jacket. And by the way, there's even a bear somewhere out in the park there. I was there with my girlfriend at Indian Beach, near Heart's Desire Beach in the park, which is not near where the reserve is, but we saw a bear scat. So there are a bear out there, which is awesome. A harmless brown bear or black bear that's not going to bother you, by the way. So no fear, just beautiful, magnificent elk on the day you'll go there Saturday. I don't want to scare people, but I'm an animal lover, so I'm not afraid of wildlife in a national park. That's what should be there if we do our job as humans, caretakers.
it's going to be on the 31st. Someone's asking, 28th or 31st? The
28th, this coming Saturday, August 28th.
I'm so sorry. Did I say the 31st? The 28th, this Saturday, not the 31st.
Correct.
Ooh, we'll make sure we put that in there again.
Saturday, August 28th. Saturday, August 28th. Come on down. Saturday, August 28th.
Yeah, I think it might be, we have to make a correction, I think. Yeah, okay, we'll do that right away. All right, folks, thanks for watching.
Thanks, everyone. Thanks, Lindsay.
We'll see you next time. And the broadcast.